What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another acrylic portrait painting video. This painting is on its third and probably last video that we're going to do on it. So we're going to talk about blending in color yet again, but I'm going to be very specific this time about the palette that I'm using. So I've introduced it to you before, but this time there is a link in the description box of the video. It's the only link in the description box, but it's to this palette. I'm not paid by this company, by the way. This is just something that I've been using for a while now in terms of studio paintings and stuff. I'm very much more acclimated to acrylic than I was not too long ago. So let's just go ahead and start to mix some colors here. Now the nice thing about that palette is that it keeps your acrylic paints wet for an extended period of time, so you don't end up wasting that much color. Now something that someone asked me in the comments recently is, what is your base mixture for your skin tones? Now I'm mixing right onto this puddle that was already there. So I'm using yellow ochre mixed into what was already on here, but yellow ochre, burnt umber, and it depends on the skin tone, the skin complexion of who you're painting. Obviously sometimes I don't get it right, but as you see here, this is kind of like a darker version of this, very simple kind of old master like skin tone, leaning towards the yellow. And the reference, I believe, is more yellow than it probably was when Rembrandt painted it, just because, you know, painting is yellow over the centuries. So the main mixture is a kind of like a grayed out orange. Think about it as just a grayed out orange. So basically your orange is red and yellow ochre, whichever red you want to use. And then I dull it out with either black or burnt umber. And whatever mixture or ratio of black and burnt umber to white will determine how grayish the skin tone or blue the skin tone is. So for example, this can look, depending on your monitor, too blue compared to the reference. But like I said, I don't like the skin color on the reference because to me it looks like it's just overly yellowed, and probably just because of the age. So depending on how much red you use, if you use more red than yellow, then you're going to get a pinkish skin complexion, and then the yellow ochre, vice versa, you're going to get more of a yellow orangey skin complexion like what we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and see if this mixture is close enough to what I have here. And I'm going to make it a tad bit more yellow, but not by a lot. So that right there is too yellow. So pretty easy to go the other way. To kill off the yellow, I'll just go with blue. So I'll put a little bit of blue in the mixture here. And I edit the whole thing, so I have a string of value here. And the blue is going to edit the entire thing and make it a tad bit more gray, but still towards, hopefully, towards the yellow. So there we have it, pretty close. Tad bit more yellow. That's closer to what the reference is showing us. So now I'm going to add white. Remember, white is a coolant. So the same with acrylic or oil paint. White is going to cool down your mixtures, so just be aware of that. And I'm using this as my little kind of like starter transition. Now obviously it's pretty close now to the picture, so I'm going to change it yet again. So more of the ultramarine blue and white. I don't want it to be exactly like the picture, though it's really up to you. If you want to paint exactly like the yellowed version of the Rembrandt, then that's up to you. Okay, so that's closer. That's not as yellow as the picture, but I think it's a little closer than what I had before, relative to what I think Rembrandt would have had when he first painted this. It could, you know, he could have used a candle, and that would have altered the color a little bit. So let me do something real quick here. So I'm going to check on my live chat because I didn't see anything thus far on the live chat, and usually we get like one comment, but let's see. I'm gonna write just hi, see if it's working, because I didn't get anything on here. Let's see. I don't know if the live chat's working. To me, it looks like it's not working. So if it looks like I'm ignoring you, I'm not. It's just for some reason the live chat isn't working. So now I'm going to basically pick whatever form that I'm going to work on, and I'm just gonna maybe work on the curvature of the forehead a little bit. Now when it comes to blending the acrylics, it's pretty much the same as oil paint. You're going to want to paint plane by plane. The only difference is that this will dry faster. However, you can use see how I'm scrubbing the paint on there? I'm using the transparency of the paint to blend into the colors that we have there. So I can thin it out even more with this glazing liquid. I should have probably linked it in the description, but it's a glazing liquid by Golden, the brand called Golden. This looks like white, but it's not. This is the glazing liquid. It just looks like it's a white color. And as you see there, it thins out the paint, although you probably can't tell. But it thins out the paint enough for me to kind of mush it into here. And now, all of a sudden, we are starting to have that kind of yellowish, old, varnished painting look. And for better or for worse, I mean, I don't necessarily care for it. Hey Shavu, welcome. Thanks for the comment. So that means that the comments are working. That's good. I'm gonna get rid of this because it's been a little bit distracting. So when you're blending with acrylics, there's two things that you need to consider. Are you blending wet into dry or wet into wet? Wet into dry or wet into wet, whichever. It actually helps to not use a ton of paint. Try to build up your layers little by little. And what it does is it actually makes your painting surface more smooth over time than oil paint, because there's so many layers. So greenish brown is what I'll use. And now that I've learned how to use acrylic, I'm going to start, well, I'm in the process of kind of planning it out, but I'm thinking of creating another series of videos for you. So definitely be on the lookout for future fun, interesting, and educational content. So there we go, kind of a greenish grayed out brown, kind of that old master looking brown that you see in a lot of these paintings. And I'm gonna just carry it on down here. So I'm adding more blue into this mixture. More blue. We'll add some of the gloss, medium. Hey Ingrid, well thank you. Great to see you. Hopefully you're feeling all right. Okay, so now we've got the background kind of out of the way. I don't really feel the need to have to address much else on the outside. So we're gonna just go jump into, here's a nice thing about acrylic that's different from oil paint, is that you can kind of just work wherever you want. And I know that sounds quite vague, but what I mean is I don't need to worry about what stage of drying my paint is, or like, am I going to paint wet into wet, wet into dry? See that? I can just start off with whatever I want, and I'll gray that down. I can start off anywhere. And I'm currently working on the studio painting. I'm not going to show it. I'll post it on Instagram whenever it's finished, but using the acrylics. And what I found is with like big paintings, for like a big area of the background that's like one flat color, I actually just prefer to use a separate palette because it doesn't, I'm not blending anything. So kind of like this awful joke that I used to say all the time with acrylics, it's kind of almost like painting a wall. And it's essentially the same thing. Literally, it's the same thing. A big flat portion. What paints am I using? Good question. These are the cheap acrylics. Not even like a proper name brand. It's just Artist Loft. That's what these are. Just Artist Loft. And my red is actually a transparent red. It's just called Brilliant Red. And I haven't really linked them because they're cheap. I haven't really experimented with the higher end acrylics yet, but these work just fine. I'm used to them. They're pretty inexpensive. I don't really have any problems with them. But I will buy at least like the red and the yellow of the, maybe just like a Zorn palette of the more expensive acrylics to see if there's any difference. With the other painting that I'm working on, I do need a phthalo, and I don't have it on this palette, so I've had to like use pretty much pure ultramarine blue, so that's like one con of my palette. But for an old master painting like this, you don't really need it. You're not gonna need like a phthalo blue or a phthalo green for a Rembrandt. I'm cleaning off some of the paint from the brush. Go back to my little mixtures. Load up the brush. This is going to be wet into wet. You have to be fast and decisive. You don't really need a lot of brushes with acrylic, you can use one brush as you're going from one transition to the next immediately. So in oil paint, you need a light brush and a dark brush, or at least I suggest it. With acrylic, not so much, because you're going right into it. Now, you gotta be very, like I said, very decisive to get a transition like that, wet into wet. You can do it wet into dry, like I did up there. So there really is no pressure, there's not that much pressure to get it perfect your first go. Even if you paint into it while it's in between drying, like this, I'm trying to show you, what it can do is kind of shovel some of the paint away, and that's, even still, that's not a bad thing. Now, I'm not trying to convince anyone to just hang up their oil paints and paint with acrylic. I am someone that just kind of likes to explore the unknown, and this felt like a nice challenge for me to explore a material that I didn't use enough in the past. So to me, it's a fun experiment that's proving to be more. It's proving to give me more advantages in my painting than disadvantages. Hey, up and coming artists. Yep, this is live. Welcome, welcome. I did tell everyone that I was going to live stream more often now. It's been less than a week. And that's another advantage to acrylic paint, especially if you're going to be doing a long, involved studio painting. You kind of don't have to, and that's getting too yellow. I'm going to add more blue. So you don't really have to wait for your layers to dry or anything. The gloss medium, it dries glossy immediately. So that's a huge benefit to a long studio painting with a lot of elements in it. And if it's a complicated painting like the one that I'm doing, you can actually go and mass everything in and then go in with charcoal or white pastel and re-outline your drawings almost immediately. Re-outline your drawing almost immediately, and it's very beneficial. You can't do that with regular oil paint. Hello, welcome everyone. So like I said, one brush, nothing too special here as I'm working from one transition to another. I clean it off with water periodically. I experimented last time with not cleaning it, and didn't really harm much. It was just an experiment. Adding a little bit more red. So I'm mixing into a puddle that was already here. And that's important with the Stay Wet palette. Remember, it's got a sponge underneath, so it keeps the paint wet. But as I've been painting from day to day, I would suggest that you wet it every morning before you're about to start painting. I didn't do that this morning, so it's kind of a little less like some of the mixtures have dried, like kind of like on the edge of the palette, like this one has dried. So I would suggest wetting it every day, or at least before every painting session. Now the form modeling, or the curvature of the form of the face, the challenge remains the same as it is with oil paint. You need to know your planes. You need to know how to, for example, like this, I pushed it a little bit lighter and then went back into it. So you need to learn how to maneuver around the values like this. It's the same process with oil paint as it is with this. Hey Jonas, welcome, welcome. I'll pull a little more light. So I'm going to use the transparency of the paint to push this out and create a soft edge. Now as you do this over and over, like I said before, it will make the painting surface more smooth than it was originally. Originally this was a very coarse, cheap canvas. Now it's starting to become as smooth as a panel over time. Clean off the brush a little bit. Recharge the mixtures, at least the dark mixtures. Clean off the brush a little bit. So that transition was done wet into wet, but it can easily be done wet into dry if you work with the light into the dark. And that's because these are very transparent paints. Yep, up and coming artists, welcome, welcome. Let's see, interesting question. You look to get into oil paint. Are there any videos you have on oil? Yep, I do. I've got quite a few of them on my YouTube channel. So pretty much almost all of them are oil painting videos. I'd say 99% of them are oil painting videos. So any of my previous videos that you click onto, the chances of it being an oil painting are pretty high. As long as you don't click a recommended one from here, because if you click a recommended video, it'll probably take you to maybe the previous video with this painting. And I think acrylic can help with your oil painting if you are watching this and you're primarily an oil painter, because the problem that it has with having to be really decisive with your mixtures and stuff is something that's going to be really useful in your oil painting. And this is the first Rembrandt that we've done in acrylic. Our first acrylic Rembrandt. Now we're gonna push the light up here a little bit and see this is all dry. So we can continue to build and build and build. Let's see. All right, so let's build a little bit more light. In the beginning, I had some issues with this, the white palette, because when it was new, there was a lot of the white palette showing, but now I've covered over most of it. So don't worry about the white of the Stay Wet palette. Over time, you actually end up covering it anyway. So let's push the light. And this may seem extreme, but I want you to see. That's too yellow, more blue. I want you to see how you can blend wet into dry via kind of a scraping motion. See that? And I can use this to put some of the top planes on the creases on the forehead. Now we have some of those creases. As we push the light, the brightness of it, that is. Real nice and simple. See how that we were able to do that wet into dry, and we were able to scatter the paint there. Hey, up and coming artists, no worries. This is the third session on this one. The previous two are the previous ones on my YouTube channel at the moment of watching this. So don't worry about it. You're not gonna miss too much. We'll be on here a lot. All right, so let's go ahead and continue to push the form here a little bit. And in the future uploads, we will probably not do 3 videos per painting. This is just kind of like the start of acrylic, and then I'm going to show you how to be a little bit faster with it, and we're going to paint more. I don't know, you'll see it as things unfold. I'll keep you on your toes. And thanks for the likes, everyone. A yellowish mixture. Yellowish mixture with just the yellow ochre. Some of the blue that was already on there. We're probably going to end up having to make it a little brown. So there's always a little discrepancy between what you mix and then what you see. Because it is acrylic, I can't have it on the side there with the Stay Wet palette. Because it'll drip. Hey, up and coming artist, do I have a Facebook page? No. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I have one for myself. It's got like old pictures from high school, but art-wise, no. I'm in the midst of working all that stuff out. Like I said, I want to start a new series of paintings and uploads and things for sale and content and things like that. But in the near future, we will. So like I said, no different than oil painting, other than you need to be decisive with your planes, more decisive. Oil paint, it allows you to be as indecisive as you want because it will take a while to dry on you. Counter that with acrylic in that it dries in a matter of minutes. Even on my palette, this is actually starting to dry, which is my fault. I should have put more water and on the back of the palette. So what that means is I just have to mix more paint as I go. Now we're putting in the plane for the Filtrum. So up and coming artist, he wrote, let's see, why I asked that I look to hook up with art to share my knowledge on the mediums of acrylics and talk about oil painting and other mediums. Yeah. I mean, it's nice to be able to have a dialogue, open dialogue about these materials. And, I'll tell you everyone from what I've been experiencing with acrylic recently, the mixing, the decision making with the planes, light and shadow, all of the fundamental, foundational stuff is the same as oil paint. And there's almost not that big of a difference other than the drying time. If you can get the drying time out of your mind and focus on the planes and the shapes, this is actually easier for long-term studio painting from my current understanding. And I'll be making more of those, but not for the internet. I'll be making those for galleries, gallery paintings. You can always add oil paint over top of acrylic. But you can't do the reverse. But I'm mixing this color just like I would with oil paint. So the decision making behind the plane is the same. I don't need an extra brush for this, though I do switch brushes sometimes, just to paint into a smaller spot. Okay, so kind of got that flow or kind of gradation of form starting to develop. This is still a little bit in the air. I'm going to get into this later on. And it helps to squint to see value. Paint what you see when you're squinting to minimize unwanted details. I'm adding a little more light under here, but I'm trying to add a cooler color, but not blue. So these mixtures are not that easy to do, but they can be easier if you mix over top of a similar color. So I added a little bit of blue to that mixture. So that's wet and dry. My biggest advice for you is to get that palette. I have it linked in the description box of the video if you don't have it already. Learn how to utilize wet over dry, as well as wet into wet. You don't need another brush. Usually I suggest a light and a dark brush in oil painting, but in acrylic, because of how it dries, you can go from light directly into dark, or vice versa. And I'd say the most difficult thing about this really is the mixture looking different on the palette versus what you see on the painting. And that's not so much an acrylic problem as it's just a palette issue. Moving your eyes back and forth. It's the same thing with a oil painting. And I'm talking about this stage in particular. So let's see, from Jonas here, do you think they blended the same way as we do today, Rembrandt's time? Well, no, not this, because this is acrylic, but I mean, yeah, I think so. If I were using oil paint, you match your value next to your adjacent value, then you decide what you're going to add next. So yeah, I'm pretty sure Rembrandt did similar kind of stuff back then. I doubt he, even though some people claim he did, I doubt he worked specifically with glazing, though there are some people that will say that he glazed everything, but the only person in history that I know of that would have glazed exclusively for form would be Bouguereau. Thanks for the question. But no, this is different than what Rembrandt would have done. And I didn't post this, or my intent with this stream was not to show how Rembrandt would have painted. If anything, I'm probably saving maybe one or two of you from the burden of thinking that the only way to make a Rembrandt, at least Rembrandt looking painting, is with you know, like lead white and vermilion and all the lead and mercury and stuff, which is cool to use in oil painting if you're careful. But you know, if you live in a apartment with your puppy or whatever, and you don't want to use anything overly dangerous, not that oil painting is that dangerous anyway, this is a nice thing to use. But yes, Rembrandt would not be able to paint wet into dry immediately like I do here and let it blend. He could paint wet into wet, which is what you do with oil paint most of the time. But yes, this is very different to what Rembrandt would have done. like I said, you gotta be very precise and decisive with your mixing. To get this color, I had to mix directly into a previous puddle to modify it. So wet into dry, since this has already dried. Wet into dry. Okay, let's use the medium now. So I'm going to clean off the brush as much as I can. And we'll use the gloss medium. So like I said, it looks like the white, and you can't see it anyway, but it's this. So pick this up, and we will use it to darken. It won't darken it right away, but we'll use that on this side of the nose. Well, it actually did darken it, I guess. So the reason I wanted that medium, now I'm going to add paint to it. The reason I want that medium is the gloss. In order to get, from my experience, in order to get a dark, just like oil paint, a really dark, you need gloss, a glossy look. And that doesn't work without kind of the shininess of the gloss. Why? Not really sure. That's just kind of how it is. So with the gloss, to me it appears darker than without the gloss. We'll apply that effect up here with a different brush. Gotta clean it off as much as I can. This brush and all my brushes, I just kind of keep in a McDonald's cup with water. Seems to do the trick. I don't use any expensive brushes with acrylic. So like I said, the medium, let me make sure to open it. The medium looks just like white paint, but it's not white paint. And yes, I know how to open a tube, and that tube doesn't have a thing on the back. In case anyone gets where that's from. Anyway, so let's add this here, and it's gonna look light at first, and may even have some paint on it accidentally. So we'll add that to the hat. So it's going to have the gloss look like an oil painting. And you need this for the darks to work. And once I can tell it's dry, I can add that now to the top. Make sure this is dry, which obviously it's going to be dry. So more of the medium. And I'm not using this as a varnish. I'm going to paint into this directly. I may not stream the entire painting process. Like I said, I think 3 is about the most that I'll upload of the same painting. But at least you can see now there's more clarity on the painting, just like an oil painting. Okay, now let's just paint directly into it. And I'll use straight black. Like I said, the paint will sink in. And what that means is it'll make it look lighter than this once it dries. And if it doesn't, then that's not so bad of a thing. Because these paints are transparent, I can put straight black onto it without worrying about it actually being straight black. And if there's ever any concern, then once it dries, just paint back into it, which it'll dry in what, a couple minutes. Clean off the brush a little bit, as much as I can. And we're gonna add the gloss to the bottom half. Okay, so I'm going to add it onto a dry palette so I don't risk contaminating it. So this is a dry palette. This is all dry. That's what the medium looks like. It looks like white paint, but it's not white paint. It's supposed to slow the drying down too, but I don't care for that. I'm not worried about the paint being the dry. I actually like that it dries fast. That's one of the things I like the most about acrylic. And if you want to be extra cautious with this, which is probably the right thing to do, I'm not being overly cautious with it, but when you do something like this, you can have less issues with the white if you use a clean brush. So that's kind of my fault. I'm gonna use a house painting brush to spread that out around. That's better. Good thing I had that nearby. Now, as you can see, it has the depth of an oil painting. In terms of the glossiness, you kind of need that gloss for the darks to look like dark, like really, really dark darks. And that's pretty much it. It's not as yellow, but don't really have much else I have to do. I'm just gonna stand back for a little bit, or sit back. Okay, so I'll push this dark a little bit more, and that'll be it. When we return, we will start another one, maybe start and finish another one, utilize the quick drying properties. So this will be our last plane that we'll add here. Okay. All right, so that is our Rembrandt study. It's not supposed to be a perfect Rembrandt copy. That's not the point. The point was to show you how to blend wet into dry using the transparency of the paint, wet into wet using basically just the fast drying nature of the paint. And then using the medium to bring more gloss into the darks, which pushes the dark even further and actually brings more luminosity into the colors. The most important thing for you really, if you don't have one of these, this is important because when you're done with your painting session, it's really easy to just cover it like this. Pretty much airtight, and put your brushes back in the water cup or clean them if you want to. I'm kind of lazy. I just keep them in this McDonald's cup and they just kind of stay, and don't really have any issues with that. This will be, I'll just ask if there are any last minute questions. Okay, so it looks like there are no last minute questions. So that was just about an hour and a couple minutes worth of painting time. So in this stage, not a lot of stuff happens in a long period of time. Mostly just working a few subtleties here and there. But the same kind of concept as with oil paint, the only difference being the fast drying, which is actually a big benefit. See how this isn't dry? And if I wanted to, I could sell it and see the gloss. Actually, you can see the gloss now. So this is with the gloss, right? And let's see a painting that doesn't have the gloss, although it looks like it kind of does, but it doesn't. So this is a painting without the gloss, and it looks like the darks ended up becoming very glossy on their own. But anyway, that is what the painting looks like with the gloss. And yeah, it looks like the darks do end up getting glossy. But in here, even the lights, as you can tell, are glossy, just like in oil painting. Well, thank you for your comment. I'm glad that you were able to learn a lot. And we will return with another one. There's plenty more that we're going to do with acrylic. Maybe not with this one. I'll probably finish it off camera and post it on Instagram. So if you're curious about what my more finished looking paintings look like, then definitely check me out on Instagram. So once again, I wish you all the very best, and I'll see you on the next one.